After playing 49 hours and 45 minutes of poker in the past 5 days, I was beginning to feel a bit run down at this point, if I'm totally being honest. But I still intended on going and playing for a 6th day in a row. So I got ready, showered, ate, and then right before I was gonna go in, I did decide to lie down on my bed, and then I accidentally fell asleep for about 8 hours. It was only when I woke up that I realized I wasn't just feeling run down, I was actually properly sick. I couldn't stop coughing. I still felt fatigued even after having slept 8 hours. So I decided to get myself tested, and turns out I did have COVID-19. Fortunately, I was double vaxxed before flying to the US, so the symptoms were pretty mild. It was really just the cough and the fatigue that had me down. But the worst part was this meant that I couldn't go into the casino for at least a week, and I had to stop grinding poker entirely. Turns out this might have been a blessing in disguise though. A few videos ago, I talked about how on Christmas Day I felt very alone and sad away from family on Christmas, and how that gave me a much needed perspective on how poker maybe shouldn't be the most important thing in my life, and I should try and strive for a better work-life balance instead of just grinding poker incessantly. And of course, after coming to this realization, I did nothing but grind poker for the next 10 days. Or maybe this sickness was the universe's or God's or Buddha's or my own body's physiology's way of just telling me like, Lee, you need to slow down and focus on these mental issues. The only problem was I had COVID. I couldn't leave my room for the next 7 days. I definitely couldn't go out and meet new people and do some fun things outside of poker. I was stuck in a room. However, this doesn't mean there was absolutely nothing I could do to try and remedy this situation. So I decided to download a dating app. Obviously, I couldn't actually go out on dates whilst I was recovering from COVID, but at least this way I could start talking to some people. Maybe I could set up some dates for when I finally did recover from COVID. It was just something to sort of get the ball rolling in the right direction where I was starting to have a life outside of poker. Man, I've been single for over a year at this point. I might as well. That's pretty much what I did whilst I was recovering from COVID. Set up a dating profile, chucked in some pictures of me next to some animals, the photos getting my good side, some voice memos where I might have exaggerated my accent just a little bit, the online dating classics there. I started swiping, I made a few matches, I started talking to some women, and even set up a few dates for the following week after I got over COVID. And this really did help my mental space, just knowing that, okay, I'm setting up a life outside of poker in some small type of way. Other than that, while I was recovering, I just did a little bit of poker study with my mate, binged some online poker vlogs, shout out to Mariano, Rampage, they were popping off at the time for sure, and then just waited for my symptoms to fully subside until the following Tuesday evening. I was ready to go. I headed into the casino, hopped into a 2-5 game for 1,000, and I was ready to get back in these poker streets. Before we get into the poker hands, I just want to let you all know, if you go over to leebets.com, you can buy some of this anti-gambling club merchandise. We have hats, t-shirts, hoodies. Check it all out on leebets.com. But now, let's get into these hands. I'm under the gun with Queen Jack of Hearts. I raise it up to 15, and then a tight aggressive big blind calls. We're heads up to a flop of 994 Rainbow with a 9 of Hearts. When the opponent checks it over to me, I think this is one of the nutted c-bet bluffing hands I can have on this board. So much backdoor equity and pretty low showdown value. Can definitely get folds from king high type of hands. So I go ahead and bet 10, and the big blind does call. So we're heads up to a turn, which is a pretty good one. It's the 10 of hearts. Let's go. We turn the open-ended straight flush draw when the opponent checks it over to me again. I think this is a good spot to go ahead and barrel. I don't think the opponent's range is exceptionally strong when they call the small c-bet on the flop. I think they're going to have a lot of pocket pairs that are below the 9, maybe some ace-x high floats on the flop as well. So I go ahead and bet 40. And then the big blind throws in the call. So it heads up to a river, which is the 3 of diamonds. The opponent checks it over to me again here. And now I think it's an interesting spot whether we want to go for the triple barrel or not. Part of me thinks this would actually be a bad hand to use just because we do block backdoor ace queen and ace jack suited floats. A lot of their natural folds I think are going to be ace high heart draws. And so having 2 hearts in our hand is actually kind of problematic to use as a bluff candidate. But having said that, I still think we can just apply max pressure to to the opponent if they do have a 4x hand through pocket 8s. We're on the river with queen high, so we're not going to win if we check. I go ahead and bet 125, and then the big blind is in the tank and they're thinking about it, which isn't what I wanted to see. But after maybe about 20 seconds of tanking, they throw their hand in the muck. Let's go. We take down this pot with only queen high. Let's go. So that was a good start. That was the only interesting hand I played on the Tuesday night, but it was a great comeback after recovering from COVID. On Wednesday night, I was out there in the real world enjoying my life, and I forgot about poker for at least one night before hopping back in a brand new game on a Thursday evening into some 2-5 for 1k, where I played this first interesting hand. Cutoff goes ahead and opens it to 25. They get 2 callers, and then the action's on my big blind with pocket kings, one of my favorite hands. I go ahead and 3-bet it to 150. Then the cutoff calls and the other 2 players fold. So it heads up to a flop, which is a decent one. It is king 7-5 with 2 spades. I go ahead and bet for value. That's how I would describe this bet. I make it 75, and I get some really good news because the cutoff rips it all in for 450. I think they've got a pretty strong range here, but it's not as strong as the nuts. I throw in the call, the opponent shows. So they have 6 of spades, so they have a pair and a flush draw. So we are fading the flush out, as well as some runner straight out, but we're happy to get it all in with top set here. Turn is the 4 of clubs, giving villain an open-ended straight draw, so definitely a bit of a scare card. We have more outs to fade on the river. When the river is the 8 of hearts, bummer on that one. The villain goes runner straight to defeat our top set. GG to the villain. They're going to win this hand. Next up, we've got the under the gun straddle on, and it folds to my cutoff, and I have ace jack offsuit. I go ahead and make it 25, and then I get a call from both the blinds and the straddle. So 4 ways to a flop of ace 9 6 rainbow. The action checks to me. I go ahead and c-bet my top pair for value here. I make it 30, and then both the small blind, big blind call and the straddle folds. So we're 3 ways to a turn, which is the 3 of diamonds putting out backdoor diamonds. Now the small blind checks, but then the big blind goes ahead and leads for 60. The action's on me here, and I think we can't really do anything except for just call here. We definitely are going to be ahead of some of villain's range. I think they're going to have a lot of hands that ace x of diamonds with a kicker worse than a jack that turn a bunch of equity with their flush draw, so they just want to go ahead and bet because they have a lot of equity. Some possibility that they're semi-bluffing too. King 10 of diamonds, something that turned backdoor diamonds. 4-5 suited is also an open-ended straight draw if they made a loose float on the flop. So definitely going to be ahead of some of their range, but really don't want to raise for value either, just because I am concerned that they do have 2 pair, maybe even like ace queen, ace king are also possible with the tighter dynamics, and people not always 3-betting those type of hands in Tampa. Also wouldn't put it past anyone to slow play a set or 2 pair on the flop. So I just decide to call, and then the small blind gets out of the way. So it heads up to the river, which is the 2 of clubs. This doesn't slow the big blind down. They go ahead and bet 125. Now the action's back on me here, and I think things are getting pretty dicey here. I do think if the villain had one of those ace x of diamond hands with a kicker worse than my jack, they probably would slow down at this point, figuring I'm going to have a lot of strong aces in my range, maybe check it over to me to try and induce a bluff or something. I'm more concerned about all those hands that are essentially ace queen, ace king, or 2 pair. I do lose to a lot, and having the jack of diamonds here is a pretty bad blocker because it blocks my opponent's missed flush draws, which I think they might be using as the bluff part of their range. So with all of that in mind, I do think folding probably is the best option here, but that's not what I did in game. In game, I got tempted by a pretty cheap price and rationalized to myself, well, I guess like 7-8 missed. So I did throw in the call, only for the opponent to show me ace queen. So oof, they outpipped us by 1, and we really didn't like seeing that. I think I lacked a bit of discipline on this one. I think I could have sniffed out that they had a value hand. Pretty disappointed in my play, to be honest. Like I mentioned, I already had a few dates set up whilst I was recovering from COVID from the Hinge app, including one on a Friday night, which is actually kind of crazy because Friday night has always been my night to go ahead and play poker. Like, it's absolutely the best night for live cash games you can possibly have. So I just really wanted to make a point to myself that, okay, I'm putting my life and my lifestyle ahead of just always going ahead and playing poker regardless of what's happening. And to give up a Friday night grind, or at least a few hours of a Friday night grind, to go on a first date was about the most extreme version of a lifestyle prioritization that I could possibly think of. And boy, am I glad that I went ahead and did it. So I told her to meet me at the Hard Rock itself. because honestly, I was planning to go play for at least a few hours after the date ended. But that didn't end up happening. Instead, we got a table by the bar on the main floor of the casino, and we just talked. We just talked about life. We talked about our passions. We got to know each other pretty well in just pure conversation. I even opened up about some of the struggles emotionally I'd been having these past few weeks, and she just heard it all. She related to it. She just made me feel so comfortable and heard in that moment, and it was just an incredibly bonding moment for a first date. I'd already had a few dates at this point, but this was really the first person where I actually felt comfortable enough to open up and be vulnerable about that type of thing. And it was just an incredibly bonding moment between the two of us. And I just felt so good that I was able to vent some of these things to someone who just heard it in such a positive and encouraging manner. And it was just like, it was absolute night and day from how I was feeling on that Christmas day when I felt so alone and unseen, to just having this amazing first date with this person who I was pretty keen on at this point and just bonded with emotionally. It was just, yeah, it was absolute night and day. If Christmas Day was one of the worst days of my life, this day was definitely one of the best. I didn't really want the day to end. We ended up talking until the cleaners were coming around the casino floor, cleaning up the floor, because it was probably like 5 a.m. at that point or something. I just really didn't want this day to end. And yeah, by the end of the day, we were already making plans to see each other again. So naturally, I didn't actually play any poker on the Friday, but on the Saturday night, I was back in the action where I played this hand. So a tight aggressive under the gun opens it up for 20, and then a tight aggressive hijack goes ahead and 3-bets to 65, and then a short stack button just rips it all in for 50, so less than the original 3-bet. Then the actions on my small blind, I look down, pocket kings, let's go. Love this hand, definitely good enough to 4-bet. I go ahead and make it 200. The under the gun player folds, and then the hijack rips it all in for 1,100. So wow, very strong move by the hijack. And honestly, I'm scared shitless of this raise, because not only is it Tampa with the tight dynamics and they're 5-bet shoving into me for 1.1k, but also they're doing it into a dead side pot because the button's already all in. So it's like very unlikely that they're bluffing, since they're going to have a hand that's good enough to beat the button's all in shove anyway. So this line is incredibly strong by villain, and honestly, when I looked at them, they seemed like stoic calm, that they were like completely indifferent to whether I called or fold, which could just be them having really good poker face, but I don't know, man. I put them on aces, and aces specifically, like not even a chop. So if that's my read, I should just be folding my kings. And in game, I had the discipline to make the move. I end up folding my pocket kings, and fortunately this time we are going to get to see if the pocket kings fold was right. Well, the button shows pocket eights, then the hijack shows pocket aces. Let's go. We make the fold, correctly fold pocket kings pre-flop. I'm so happy that I was able to go with my read and escape what is the ultimate pre-flop poker call here. Folded my kings, then the board runs out. Very safe for pocket aces. They end up scooping the button, and they would have scooped us too if we made the call off, but I went with my read and escaped the absolute death of getting stacked aces versus kings. Let's freaking go! Despite the spectacular fold there, I wasn't feeling that confident in this session and actually decided to cut it short, go home, get some rest before coming back to a Sunday daytime grind, which is where I played this hand. So we have the under the gun straddle on. It folds to my low jack with king queen off. I go ahead and raise it to 25, and then I get 3 different callers. So we're 4 ways to a flop of 8-6-3 with 2 clubs. The action checks me. I just go ahead and check it. We've whiffed pretty hard on this board. Then the action checks through. So we do see a free turn, which is the 4 of diamonds. Still a pretty big whiff for us. Small blind checks, and then a loose aggressive straddle goes ahead and bets 50. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, Lee, what the hell? Like, why is this hand even in the video? Like, surely you just fold here, right? Well, I didn't fold here. I made what is honestly a very spewy call. I just like to call the bet. I guess my thinking at the time was it's a loose and aggressive opponent. There's 2 flush draws out there, and we have some showdown value with our king high that probably beats a lot of their combo draws. So I guess that was my thinking at the time, but honestly, looking back, this is pretty obviously just some tilt, and yeah, not super proud of this play, to be honest. Fortunately, like, the other two plays do fold, so we do go heads up to a river, which is the two of hearts. The villain checks it over to me here, and somehow we have king high, no flush draw in this spot. I think we just absolutely have to bluff with this hand. Like, if we got here with this hand, like, we just have to bluff with it. To be fair, we do block the front door club draw, which means we are going to get more folds. I mean, our hands are kind of tied. We end up here with an absolute bullshit hand. What, we're going to check back and lose to his ace high flush draws. So anyway, I go ahead and decide to bluff. I go ahead and bet 150, and then the straddle like snap calls. So I guess they figured out we were up to some nonsense. I end up having to show my king queen. Very, very embarrassed about it. I get even more embarrassed when the opponent shows king three of clubs. So they actually called me with bottom pair. I guess it was that obvious that I just had absolutely nothing here. And yeah, this was an awful way to end the session. Clearly I'm on tilt. I ended up packing my chips, calling this session over, and it was the last hand I played on the week. So a little bit of a punt off there to close out the week here. And I really like how the week started off. I was definitely putting more time into my personal life than I was just grinding away like a robot endlessly. Although I do think that sort of made my play suffer a bit, judging by that last hand in particular. This was actually the last week my mate and I had booked in our Airbnb in Tampa, and despite some run good on the tables and away from the tables as well in this city, we were still curious to see what the games were like in other parts of Florida. So we hopped in our rented Prius and drove 4 hours down to our Airbnb that was right next to the Seminole Hard Rock Hollywood in South Florida. That's where we would stay for the next week whilst we grinded out some more cash game action. To see what happened down in South Florida, make sure you hit the subscribe button because that's what my next video is going to be about. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.